Hi everyone, my name's Kieran. I'm a back-end engineer and tech lead for our open banking team at Monzo. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to talk about open banking today, as much as I know that you'd love to hear about European banking legislation. The important thing is that I've spent the past year and a half in the product team at Monzo, leading various squads, and along the way, I've picked up a fairly good sense actually for how we run our product teams, and that's what I'd like to talk to you all about today. So Monzo has this, I think it's fair to say, worldwide reputation for being a company with a great culture. And I think some of this is for the usual bands of reasons. So we have good pensions, a nice office, free drinks, dogs in the office. And I think lots of places do this, like lots of companies have these perks. So these things alone don't really explain why Monzo has this great reputation. So I'd like to talk about my views on what sets Monzo apart with a particular focus on our product culture. So to start with, let's think a bit about what I mean when I say product culture. So to be honest, there are loads of different ways we could possibly define product culture, and I've typed up my interpretation on the slides here. I've said it's the parts of a company's culture that make individuals working in product teams feel empowered to realize their full potential. And amongst other things, it kind of determines how able people in product teams feel to be able to sort of ship things quickly without having to cut through loads of bureaucracy and loads of red tape. So let's think about the first part of that definition for a second, which is about making sure that individuals feel empowered to realize their potential. Monzo hires some amazing people. We compensate them well. We give them a lot of responsibility. And I think it would be a real shame if we had this product culture where we hired people and then did not trust them to make important decisions for our company. We hire people so that they can bring their very diverse experiences to Monzo and tell us what to do and give us direction and not the other way around. Making important product decisions that directly affect our customers is a really awesome and deeply rewarding feeling. I think it's so important that we have a product culture that allows people the freedom that they need to do what they feel is best for the company. And I think this is actually one of the reasons why Monzo's voluntary attrition rate, that's kind of the rate at which people leave the company, hovers consistently around 1%, whereas the industry average is around 15%. So there's a huge difference there. Let's think about the second part of that definition, which was about avoiding bureaucracy. So in the early days of a company's existence, say company might decide, okay, now is a good time for us to double our headcount. Maybe we've just got some funding. After the company has hired those people, they might reasonably expect to get through all of their work twice as quickly as they did before. But as we all know, as companies get larger, they seem to get less and less efficient at doing things. And this is because as the company grows and onboards more and more employees, they need to introduce new policies, new procedures, new frameworks just in order to keep everything running properly. I think a good example of this is that Monzo has just introduced this new product approval checklist, and this is a process that all of our product features go through before they can make it into the app. If we're not really careful with the way we implement these features, they could end up imposing a disproportionately onerous burden on every person who joins. That would have a huge impact on our product culture, and it would really slow us down. So how do we avoid that? Well, I'd like to talk through a few kinds of important elements of our product culture that I think allow us to stay clear of this problem and enable us to stay efficient and impactful even as we scale past 1,000 people. I'll start with what I personally think is most important, and that's cross-disciplinary squads. So this means that every product squad at Monzo consists of people from lots of different disciplines from across the business. There'll usually be a product manager, a tech lead, as well as maybe a designer, a data analyst, some back-end engineers, some front-end engineers, and usually a product tester as well. And some squads, the squads who need it, will also have access to a product marketer, a lawyer, a compliance analyst, for example. And critically, this setup means that we have no dependencies on other teams in the business, so we can all work together to get stuff done efficiently. I think it's also really important to note that the product manager is not the manager of the team, and it's very rare that they be the sole decision maker in that team either. We make decisions together with input from everybody in the team. So engineers will review designs, designers will review the code that we write, and so on. So it's very collaborative. The next one is squad remit. So when we set up new squads, they're usually not given a specific project to work on, but rather they're given a remit instead. So, for example, we might spin up a new squad and say that the responsibility for this squad is to drive growth or to drive engagement with the product. And it's then up to the squad to decide what they should do to achieve that goal. For example, the growth squad last year decided that the best way to do this was to offer a paid referral, so like the give five, get £5 thing, which I'm sure you've all used. So they were able to go to the board and say, can we please have a budget for this? It's going to be quite expensive, but we think it's worth it. They're able to get that approved and get going on the project quickly. And whenever the company's goals get updated, so let's say there's less focus on growth this quarter, we'll be able to trickle that down to the squads as well. I think it's so important that individuals in product teams have the opportunity to work on things that they want to, even if it's not a top priority for the squad or for the company. And this is where Monzo time comes in. So every 4 weeks, we set aside a hack day for everyone in the product team and other teams as well to work on what they personally consider to be important. I think Monzo time has been really incredible for the company. In it, we've made some amazing product features like our gambling block, which has set an industry precedent, actually. So we did most of the work for gambling block in one day. We did it with a small team. We spent practically no money on the feature. And other institutions, other banks are now like following our lead, and they also want to implement this. And I heard on the grapevine that one of our kind of competitors has a lead time of 6 months and a budget of £500,000 to implement this feature that we did most of in a single day. And so it can be really incredible. One of my Monzo Time projects was to develop an integration with a service called If This Then That. Some of you may have used it. It got wide press coverage. We're about to hit 5 million applet runs there. So it's a hugely popular feature that was developed entirely in Monzo Time. So Monzo Time is such an important part of our product culture because it gives everybody the opportunity to work on what they want to work on and not necessarily what the company wants them to work on. I think another huge part of our product culture is that we don't have kind of a set rule book for how things should run or a prescribed way for how squads should run their kind of day-to-day operations. Some teams use a Scrum approach, some use Kanban, others prefer a much more informal approach where they don't have so much process. And when we find that stuff works for one team, we'll encourage them to write it up and share it on Slack and suggest that other teams do the same. So for example, one of our product squads recently started doing this idea of a product review session where they meet with the product directors and design directors. That seems to work really well to kind of get challenge and feedback on ideas. And so we've rolled that out to all of the product squads in the company. I'd like to give an honorable mention to our fake product ideas board. So has anybody heard of or followed Board Elon Musk on Twitter? Yeah. So Board Elon is this kind of stream of quirky, awesome, but wholly impractical ideas. And we have our own version of this internally called Fake Product Ideas, where we kind of encourage people to post all sorts of wild and wonderful things. My favorite suggestion, so who here, please put your hand up if you've ever had to freeze your Monzo card for any reason. So there's like a clear monetization opportunity here. Like so many people use this feature. So it's a feature called Super Freeze. So how about we make this a premium feature? And not only when you freeze your card, it freezes your card, but also the cards of everyone in a 10-meter radius. I mean, this worked for Tinder. They have likes and super likes, so surely it'll work for us as well. So I don't think we're going to build Super Freeze anytime soon. But from time to time, someone posts an idea that they think is really out there, and they put it in Fake Product Ideas, and we're like, hey, Real Product Ideas is over here. Like, you should go and repost this in Real Product Ideas, and we'll actually do it. So finally, I'd like to talk about how we maintain our product culture as we scale. So this illustration is supposed to be Hot Chip in a sort of like Renaissance pose, but it kind of looks like he's just had one too many and he's about to fall down a flight of stairs. So Monzo is a company that's growing very quickly, and it's easy to worry about what's going to happen to the culture that everybody has worked so hard to develop over the past few years. People ask questions like, will bureaucracy start to creep in? Will we start to slow down? Will it be more difficult for individuals in the business to ship their ideas to production? And will Monzo turn into this big, slow corporate giant like the other banks? And I think these are valid concerns. Our first reaction might be to become defenders of the culture where we do everything that we can to keep things exactly the way they are. And I think that's well-meaning, but it's a mistake because culture doesn't belong in a museum. It's this living, evolving thing. The culture that we had when Monzo was just 30 people simply would not scale up to a team of 30,000 people. And if we fail to wake up and realize that, we would not have the kind of reputation that we do today. And that's because we've seriously outgrown that culture already. So how do we do that? So as the people who are most familiar with what Monzo's culture is like now, I think early employees have a very important duty to guide the evolution of the company's culture. So as we grow, inevitably, more structure, new processes that we didn't previously need will have to be put in place. I think an example of this is the product approval checklist that I spoke about earlier on. So it's really important, in my opinion, that early employees critically read these proposals, give detailed feedback to the writers to make sure that what we're introducing is not fundamentally incompatible in some way with the company that we'd like to create. So I'm employee number 300-ish. We're now maybe like over 1,000. So like right now, you wouldn't think I'm super early, but when we're 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 people, I think 300 will be pretty darn early. Um, and also, to be clear, we don't walk around with our employee numbers on our badges. I think that would be quite Orwellian as a culture, actually. So the last thing I'd like to talk about is our focus on principles. So we'd really like to nail and maintain the principles that underpin our product culture. And it's really these principles that we need to defend rather than the culture at any specific time. I think a really good example of this is our insistence on specifics. So how many times have you heard, we can't build that because it's technically going to be too difficult, or we can't do that for legal reasons? I used to hear that all the time, but not so much here at Monzo, because I'd like to know the specific piece of legislation that you have in mind when you say, we can't do this for legal reasons. And actually, when you really dig into it, you'll often find that vague statement was just masking a lack of understanding. I think we're also really careful with the language that we use here. So we don't call people resources. We don't use gendered language like guys. And our strong feedback culture means that when somebody does make a mistake, we're able to go to them and let them know. So I hope you found that insightful and informative. My Twitter handle is on the slide. If you have any questions for me, I'll also be around in the break, which we have now. Thank you very much.